thought of a couple things I was watching that I wanted to tell you about. Back during that LPA period where we had this rogue LP, Land Planning Agency group, one of the things they did, they put this thing called Rural Protection Area Overlay on all the areas that are rural in Lake County. And there was an outcry by the property owners. You can't do this. You're putting more restrictions on us than we have now. It was just like this whole new layer of restrictions on what they couldn't do with their property. And they basically said, sue us. You don't like it, sue us. And the county attorney didn't do anything about it. None of the commissioners at the time did anything about it. They adopted it. Jennifer Hill was the only one at the time that voted against it. And the property owners did sue the county. And then when I got into office, we were just at the point of resolving those settlement agreements. And unfortunately, there were a few that didn't. They didn't get attorneys, they didn't sue, and they're still on the books. So, one of the things that I'm trying to do is incrementally go through the comp plan and try to purge those things that were put on top of people, those added restrictions that were just completely arbitrary. And I also want to point out that in the comp plan that we have now, as a result of that that kind of, I call it the road group, but the commissioners were letting them have their way. They were letting them do this stuff, and then the commission ultimately signed off on it. All of the stuff that he talked about, direct density to existing urban centers. There's it's page after page, right down to the kind of plumbing fixtures you can use in Lake County are in this book. It says that in the Sorrento area, we're not allowed to have gated communities because the guy that was on the board from the Nature Conservancy, he thought that was a bad thing. People would drive further to go in and out, and if you didn't have a gate, then you could connect them through to other areas. And plus, it wasn't fair for some people to live inside gated communities and other people not to. And there's also a provision in here that says throughout Lake County we should discourage gated communities. There is greenhouse gas reduction. This whole thing about trip capturing, reduction of emissions from the transportation sector, energy audits of county facilities. Water is a big way they use, control over people. The Water Management District came out in, I want to say it was around 2006 or 7, they came out and said people can only water their lawn so much. And they'd only done that in the past during droughts, but then they put these major restrictions in place. That was the same time that Niagara came into Lake County and wanted to have a water bottling plant. And the Water Management District said okay because there was nothing in state law that said that you couldn't do that. And the interesting thing about it is that, a Coca-Cola plant or a beer plant or any type of beverage plant uses just as much water in its production as Niagara does. It's just that Niagara takes it and puts it in a bottle and sells it. But, so that became like this huge issue in Lake County because people were ticked off. They're being told, we have a water crisis. You can't water your lawn, but we're going to let somebody bottle our water and sell it. It didn't make sense. But, that's part of this control thing, and they use this crisis mentality. I think that we ought to be careful with our water. I think that we ought to be smart about it, but at the same time, I question a lot of the stuff that I see comes out of the Water Management District about water. So there's a whole movement out there about the springs are drying up. I don't know if you've read the articles in the paper. But what I heard recently is that what's happened is that the Water Management District is using a different type of measuring technology. So we don't really know if the data that they're using to tell us that the springs are putting out less volume is even true. I don't understand why they don't go back and use the old technology and compare it to the old numbers to say, okay, here's what we have today, here's what we collected in 1990, and compare, and then you'd know if we really had a decrease in the volume. But that was amazing. You would never hear that unless you got down into the details and you learned that they were actually using a different type of technology to measure the output. I did want to say something about Governor Scott. No matter how you feel about Governor Scott, he did something pretty amazing right after he got into office. And he worked with the legislature, and they changed the comprehensive plan process in the state of Florida, and they returned most of the power back to the local government. And they took away bureaucratic authority from the Department of Community Affairs. And that kind of went unnoticed, and probably for good. I mean, it's probably good that it did, because people would have made an issue out of it when, in fact, this was really, really a good thing. Another thing that he did was they put a rule in place. There, these development of regional impact that I talked about. If you have over so many homes or so many square feet, you have to go through this whole elaborate process, and it takes you like almost 2 years to get through the development review process. He was key in stripping that away if it was bringing in a certain number of jobs to your area, and as long as the development wasn't right on your county line, because that would create a conflict with the county next door that would be upset that they wouldn't have a say in the impacts on them. So as long as it was inside your county, not right on the county line, if they created a certain number of jobs, they waived this ERI requirement. So that was very good for job creation in the state of Florida. Let's see. And as far as what we can do, the plaque, that bought all the land, that went out and picked the land on, for a long time they sat on this property, and there was a real feeling out there that they didn't want people to, like us county residents, to be able to walk on this land, or, take hikes, or have picnics, or, whatever you do on public land. They wanted it to be away from human use, which is very consistent with a lot of environmental sustainability stuff, that they actually want to restrict where human beings can go. Open space, that meeting, I have been to numerous meetings just like that. One in Eustis that was almost just identical to that, where people said, well, wait, when you're talking about open space, you're talking about private land? And they're like, yeah, I mean, that's how they're using open space as a way to take away your rights. And it's in here. I mean, there's all this stuff about 50% open space. If you're in the Sorrento area, you can't have a subdivision of say 1 acre lots. You would have to make them half-acre lots and take half of the land and put it in common open space. It can't be open space on somebody's property, it's going to be common open space. So all of this collective stuff, it's all ended up here in this comp plan. So I think that we have to be careful. I've read a lot of the stuff online about what the other guys say about us. And I've read a whole commentary on that video and how they describe that video. If you go to Southern Poverty Law Center, there's a great article where they're basically making fun of us. But it helps you understand how they marginalize us and how effective they are at it. And that's why I caution against, getting real upset about certain parts of this, just because you see the word sustainability, or you see the word collaborate, or, there's like all these buzzwords they have. We have to be careful, like on these grants I talked about. There are times to draw a line in the sand. And when you see strings attached that have to do with social justice, and they tell you about how you have to redistribute stuff, you draw the line there, and that's what I try to do, is I try to read through all this stuff to make sure that we're not saying yes to something that we're actually, promoting this to the extent that it will be detrimental to our personal freedoms and
That's another reason I would like to ask everybody to look into the Common Core, because I saw a lot of the books that they're going to be giving to our children in the schools that promote exactly Agenda 21, sustainable living, global warming. And they present it all to the kids as facts. So it's scary stuff. They're going to indoctrinate to the next level.
And I went to some of these early rollouts of Common Core, and they did some really cool stuff where they showed like 1.5-year-old, 2-year-olds with iPads, and they were pointing out colors, and they got you feeling all warm and fuzzy about this. It's great. But then you start reading the stuff about how they're going to collect data, and there's just a lot of things that, if the state of Florida could say, okay, we'll do this, this, and this, but we're not going to do this, that would be one thing. But I kind of get the impression now that you have to sign up for the whole thing. So, and if they're using that as a way to get all of this Agenda 21 into textbooks and everything, I think that in and of itself is a reason to stand up. But I'm not sure, in the long run, what we do. I think we incrementally should try to chip away at the stuff locally so that we try to protect ourselves as much local as we can. We're still going to have these issues, this conflict that I talked about how, yeah, we want to protect the countryside of Lake County. We want to protect the view shed, even when it's somebody else's. We've got to figure out a way to, how do we, I would rather take that plaque money when they bought all the land and actually pay people, the ones that we want them to keep their land forever the way it is now, and pay them for it, so that we can enjoy their view shed. We've got to come up with a better way of how we protect the aesthetics of the area without just stripping people of their property rights.
Are there any cities in Lake County that members of it?
I don't think any more, Vance, but
No,
Orange
there aren't
County
any.
is- I think
And up in
Orlando-
Ocala, there's maybe
Buddy
some.
daughter, he'd have to be.
But, and there's another couple counties. There's several places
There's a
around in
couple
Florida,
out
but none here.
recently. Mhm.
In New England, they have those trusts.
Right.
Where you put the land in the trust, so that people voluntarily, if they own a side of a mountain or it's beautiful land, and they voluntarily put it into the trust.
Mhm.
In New England, there's a lot of that.
And that really hasn't taken off in Florida.
No, you don't see any of that here. That's big up there.
Yeah, and maybe just parenthetically on that point, that when people do put their land voluntarily into a conservation site,
Right.
as a conservation easement, you do not get any federal tax break unless you agree to put that land in conservation forever.
Forever.
It's perpetuity, so that's something that needs to change, otherwise we lose private property and it all goes.
Yeah, eventually you'll have it all in
Yeah.
these.
But my question, this is the comp plan you have on the table there, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and do I understand you said you were going through this and you're sort of winnowing out some of these things that ultimately should be
Mhm.
removed? I would just like to suggest that maybe you're doing this to document the process that you're doing and put this somehow on paper. And I'm sure we would help with that if that's what, because what you're doing needs to be done literally in every county in the United States, because you're right, particularly they have worked at the most local level, primarily the county, and especially here in Florida. So what you're doing there, every county needs to do, and I would say most people, it's so easy to run out of this meeting and say, man, we're going to smash Agenda 21, but to get something where rubber hits the road, that's what has to happen. And once you've done that, then there has to be a process of working with the county commission to now vote to delete those things and maybe replace those statements with better or good land, private property rights policy. And anything that can be done to document this so that in the future we could take this in any and every county in Florida, maybe even call a conference where people could be trained. Here is what you have to do. If you want to, you just can't
Well,
say,
it would
we
go
don't want
from
to see
being
Agenda
this
20.
thick to.
Every county has one of those. I know it's a hard process, and I applaud you for doing it, because that's exactly what needs to be done. And it's incremental. You can't just wave a wand and it's all done in one day.
And I think that politically, you have to be careful in Lake County, because, I think that we have a general concern about what can happen if growth gets out of control, and to find that balance, we talked about maybe doing one of these resolutions about Agenda 21. Commissioner Parks has suggested we put some language in here about we're not implementing Agenda 21. And I was like, well, you can put that in, but it doesn't mean that the whole thing is Agenda 21. Because, that doesn't fix it. You got to start getting this stuff out of there. I will definitely work with you on that. But I think, Dan, turn off your camera now.
Please.